Assalamu alaikum, namaskar, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You're on the air with Muheeb Hoque, and welcome back to Let's Talk Education and Career. Before I begin the program today, I would like to wish you all a very happy Ramadan Mubarak, best wishes for the month, and we are looking forward to celebrating Eid in the next 2 weeks. Today on our program, we will be discussing intercultural communication and how it may impact you when you go to study overseas. With us, we have Malina Kostner. She's an expert in intercultural communication. So I'm going to pass the mic on to her so that she can introduce herself.
Hi everyone, my name is Marlene. Thanks for having me here today. So just talking a little bit about myself. I'm German, so I grew up in Germany, and I came as an international student to Australia about 7 years ago. And I studied my undergraduate program here in international business. And that's when I realized my interest in cultural studies. So I then decided to complete a master in communication and specializing in intercultural communication. And since then, I've been involved in a few projects around that topic, including some research projects as well. In the last 5 years, I've been working in the education industry in Australia, mainly with international students.
Thank you, Malina, for that very nice introduction. You're very welcome in this show today, and thank you for your time. Now, on to our very first question. Can you tell us what are some of the challenges that international students may face when moving to a culturally different place?
Besides other challenges, I think the process of adapting to a new culture is quite a significant one. It's usually referred to as the acculturation process. So basically means when two culturally different groups come into first-hand contact with each other. So in your case, it might be that you're moving from Bangladesh to a different country, for example, Australia. And it's likely that you'll be facing a lot of differences. Some of them might be very obvious, such as different food or different eating patterns, and some might be a little bit more subtle, such as greetings or body language. And the stress associated with the process of adapting to that new culture is usually referred to as culture shock.
Thank you, Malina. That is very true. I remember when I was moving from Bangladesh to Australia, I noticed a lot of differences in food patterns as well as greetings, and I certainly experienced a little bit of culture shock. Can you tell us a bit more about culture shock?
Thanks for sharing, Muheeb. I can certainly say that I myself went through the process of adapting to the new environment as well. So, in terms of culture shock, people usually go through 4 stages when facing culture shock. The first one is the so-called honeymoon stage. So it's the initial enthusiasm and, I guess, optimism when arriving in a new country. So you'll have a lot of new experiences, meet new people. It's all rather exciting. That's usually the first few days, could be the first few weeks. But that's often followed by a stage where all the new things become irritating rather than appear interesting. So you've done the sightseeing, that's all finished, and you start to participate. So things like you need to look for housing now, for example, food, shopping, commuting. How do you get to university, and finances as well. So you start having the responsibilities really. And this is the stage where you might experience that culture shock impact your life negatively. So things that may have appeared exciting before, such as a new cuisine, for example, now turns into feelings of you miss your home food, you miss the way things are done back home, and you miss the familiarity from back home.
Thank you, Malina. That is very true. I can certainly say that I missed home-cooked meal when I moved from Bangladesh to Australia, especially my mother's food. Anyways, moving on to our next question. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the negative impacts of culture shock or some of the dangers of feeling culture shock?
Culture shock in itself is fairly common, but I think it can get dangerous in a way if it's ongoing over a long period of time, it can potentially lead to feelings of depression. And one of the things that you may realize or you start doing is that you may get very critical of the host countries, of the new country, your new environment. And you may feel like the locals are indifferent to your struggles, which often leads to forming negative stereotypes about the people in the new country and the country itself.
That is certainly very true. When I first moved here, I noticed a lot of my friends were going through similar feelings of culture shock. How will you know that you or your friends are facing culture shock, Malina?
So, culture shock, there are several, I guess, indicators how you can see it in yourself or in friends. Culture shock at its lowest point can impact your life on 3 levels. It can impact your social life or how you interact with others. So, indicators are withdrawal from conversations, excessive frustration and complaining, and often a defensive communication style. It can also impact you psychologically, so you may have increased levels of stress or loneliness or frustration, and it's often linked to homesickness. And sometimes it even impacts you physically, so you may struggle with sleeping or you have low energy levels.
Okay, so can you please give us some tips on how we can overcome culture shock?
I think being aware of it is the best starting point. Knowing that most people will go through adjustments when moving to new places. I mean, this is even true if you move to a different place within your country, and let alone moving overseas. So you should really, I guess, anticipate it and expect it to a certain degree. And knowing that it's common, it's very common, you're not alone, and it's temporary. A lot can be done through preparation, I believe. So find out about the new place before you go there. And I guess the other thing is that you should really try to form social networks around you. It's so, so important. And that should be within your ethnic community, but also beyond. Because your friends and the people around you are likely to have experienced similar issues, and so they can help you to adjust. And I'd really like to stress, I guess, the friendship formation, that it should be within the community, really to have someone to talk to who can understand you. You know, you can possibly make that home-cooked meal with you, but it's so important to go beyond that as well, with locals as well as with different nationalities. That will help you make the process of adapting so much easier. And this is really what, I guess, in the research is called the recovery stage of culture shock. We start forming those important social networks which help you overcome your stress and your negative feelings towards the host country. I believe it's an attitudinal thing, so changing your attitudes is absolutely important. And attitudes can already, I guess, before you even go, just expecting that there will be differences. And when you get here, embrace the new ways of doing things without giving up your cultural traditions. This is an ongoing process. But with time, you really feel the confidence that you can handle new situations, new ways of doing things, and new approaches. And I think the key is to remember that there are many differences, but there are a lot more commonalities than differences. And before you know it, you've developed a sense of belonging in your second home.
That is very true. I think the key is to take it very seriously, but also knowing that you will get over it in time. Now, what do you think may prevent students from overcoming culture shock issues?
I think often students or international students struggle to form relationships outside of their ethnic communities. And as I said before, being connected to your community is important, the support and the understanding. But it often prevents you, if that's the only, I guess, friendships you form in that new country, often prevents you from fully integrating into the new host culture. The good thing is that universities are a brilliant space to meet people from different cultures. There's lots of opportunity. There's a lot of clubs, associations, so why not join them? It will make it easier to settle into the new culture, and you learn a lot about the local culture as well as different cultures from different countries from your new friendships.
I can certainly vouch for that. Once I started my university in Australia, I met a lot of students through joining the student council that was at the university. It was a great way for me to make new friends, immerse myself in the university culture, but also in the local culture. So, once you've overcome culture shock in the new environment, is there anything to keep in mind when getting back to your home country?
I think it's important to quickly mention reversed culture shock. It's usually referred to as the adjustment when returning to your home country, and it's often in a way more shocking since it is unexpected. So after you've lived overseas for usually an extended period of time throughout your studies, you've had a lot of new experiences, gained new understanding, you develop new skills, and you often also develop new interests and different opinions. So upon returning home, there's often you'll expect that everything will be exactly the same, so that you will fit in into life without any problems, and that you can pick up relationships and friendships exactly where you left off before you went overseas. And there's often an expectation on your side that people will be very interested in your stories and hearing about your personal growth. But the reality really is that life didn't stop back home. Important things happened in the lives of the people back home, your friends, your family. So there will be a readjustment period. And I guess my tip is to expect it, that it will take some time to readjust back home into your life, figuring out how your new skills and attitudes fit into that new life back home. And I think key here is mutual sharing, sharing your stories and also asking what happened in the lives of your friends and family. I think for me personally, reverse culture shock is quite an interesting phenomenon. When I first, read about it or studied it, I was rather surprised that it exists. And I was intrigued to find out that when I actually went back home, I experienced it myself. So, especially during the time of studies, when you do your, bachelor or master's overseas, it's a time of learning, of growing, of expanding your knowledge. And it's often linked to the experience that you make with your peers in that particular country. And for me personally, just to share, a bit of insight, is that when I went back home to Germany, there were several, instances where, I kind of forgot, oh yeah, this is the way we do things, or this is the way we look at things. And there was some levels of, reverse culture shock in a way, because I felt that I was a bit out of touch at times. Obviously life went on, and although with media, I suppose you do stay, social media and also media in general, you can stay in touch with what's happening in your home country and with your family and friends, but it's not quite the same than being there. So that was something that I had to learn myself as well. But as I said before, often it just takes that sitting down and actually just honestly sharing how you feel and what you've experienced, putting things a little bit into perspective, which helps you bridging that gap.
Thank you so much for adding that personal story. Would you like to add anything else today before we finish?
I think it's easy to get carried away with focusing too much on the differences. And I'd like to say that, first of all, differences are not necessarily a negative thing. makes it exciting. And second of all, then you always have more things in common than things that are different.
Thank you, Malina. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me here.
It has been a very enlightening episode for us, and I certainly learned a lot, and I'm sure our listeners did as well. So that is the end of our show today. I hope you found it useful and enjoyed it. In our next episode, we will be talking about part-time job as you study. I look forward to sharing more tips and tricks in our next show. Assalamu alaikum and goodbye until next time.